if you haven't seen this, I would encourage you to go and see it. It's at RNZ. There's this new show that Guyon Espiner does called 30 with Guyon Espiner, where he talks for only 30 minutes. And of course, it came up in the conversation around Tuku Morgan around his underpants. We all know that story. And he said some really interesting things. Like, I was like, that's an interesting thing. We're not playing this part tonight, but I'll just kind of summarize it. He was talking about how he is not apologetic for it at all. He had budget. He was allowed to spend it on clothes, and he totally sees it as something that Labour got in and had a crack at him for and used it against him. He spent $4,000 overall, apparently, and he says at the same time, some people who I was working with are spending $4,000 on a suit. It's just a different take, a really interesting take. If you know a bit about the background of that, you should check it out. But let's have a look at Tuku Morgan today, and the two things we're going to cover off. You can see we're basically 23 minutes through the show, so there's a whole lot here that you can go and check out for yourself, which is quite interesting as well. We're going to talk about the treaty principles referendum. That's the first part of it, and then we're going to get to the bit I talked about earlier, which is him describing co-governance in a way that I'd never heard described before, and I thought was just fascinating. And not just fascinating like, oh, this is a good watch, but like a holy crap, that's really good. It's really interesting. Let's have a look. This is Treaty Principles Referendum. Tuku Morgan with Guyon Espiner.
Talk about some of them. ACT wants to rewrite the treaty principles bill.
Nonsense.
The principles is established by judges, politicians, lawyers, etc., are basically partnership, participation, and protection. David Seymour, the ACT leader, says he wants to give the public a say. What is wrong with that in your view?
Yeah, well, he can look. The document is about a partnership. The treaty is about partnerships. All right, Māori and the Crown. Simple as that. You can't give the same rights to an immigrant to this country that has been long entrenched, not only in law but in our history since 1840. So while Seymour tries to...
Let's unpack that for a second.
Well, I don't think you really... I mean, no offence to Guyon, you don't really need to. That's perfect. That's your answer. Ironically, that sounds very similar to what we've been talking about to do with contract law. The contract signed between two parties, you can't just choose to insert, 4 million other people into that contract because you want to. I mean, we are going to keep going, but I think he's just laid it out, Chewy. He's nailed it down. It's like there's a contract, there's an agreement between two parties. Conversation over.
Yep. No, I agree.
Sorry, because you drifted off, but what I heard was you can't give the same rights to an immigrant to New Zealand, as opposed to someone who's indigenous to New Zealand. Is that what you're saying?
No. Because what Seymour was saying is that actually every other New Zealander has the same rights as Māori.
Yes,
that's a nonsense.
So what are you saying, that other New Zealanders don't have the same rights as Māori?
Under the treaty, in terms of our rights to whenua, to the taiao, to the environment, all of those things that are safeguarded in the treaty are things that belong to Māori and to the Crown.
So
where this gets caught up, and David Seymour will spin this, is talking about rights. Same rights under the law, same rights under the treaty. If you want to get away from what some people think is a controversial race element, same rights under a contract. Of course you don't. You don't have the same rights under the contract I have with my bank. It's between me and the bank, And so there will be a hang up on that word of rights, but you could look at it this way. We have the agreement. So what we've agreed to, you don't get to jump in on. That's the phrasing that he's using for rights. But you know what they're going to do? They're going to jump on that and go, well, Tuku Morgan says they've got special rights.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Well, but yeah.
And that's my issue there is I can see what he's saying and I agree, but it is phrased in such a way that it is going to get twisted and held up and all of that sort of thing. It's like the agreement is between Māori and the Crown.
Yeah.
That's that shouldn't be up for discussion, and that sort of thing. And then when Seymour drags in, but so an immigrant to this country doesn't have any rights. No, it's not that at all, because it's not a treaty between Māori and everybody else that came after. It's the Crown, and the Crown gives non-Māori the rights that they have negotiated in that treaty. That's what I don't see why it's so hard for people to get their fucking head around.
Well, people either play dumb, so they're dishonest actors, or they are dumb, and they can't understand that the word rights has been used slightly differently. Just like last week, the word strike was used slightly differently. A strike, Māori were just saying, we're just walking off our job. Strike. No, not an official strike where the union has to. That's not it. We've used it in a different way. If we stop and think about the word rights in this instance are talking about the agreement we have, the conditions that only we are allowed to satisfy under this contract, under the treaty. That's different from your rights out in society to to not be discriminated against based on your gender or whatever. It can be used slightly differently, and this is a big thing in the world at the moment. And I've had this conversation lots of times on this program, so I won't bang on about it, but I firmly believe dishonest actors and not very smart people are using this current climate, this current day and age we're living in, where there is a very fast moving change to language, and they're not acknowledging the change. They're saying this is what it meant 5 years ago. Now, I'm not saying that's happening with the word rights, but if you're thinking about gender issues, what is it? What gender is this? What gender is that? And the example that we've talked about, Mount Taranaki used to be Mount Egmont, and then it changed the name of it, and there was a language change, and now no one really knows of it as Mount Egmont because there's been a transitional change through through years into a new thing. The word fire, Chewy, you ask them what the word fire means, they'll go, well, it's a flame. No, it means good. The word choice, it means good. What's picking, so the way we use language is very different, and language is in a very volatile state at the moment, and it's changing a lot. And some people are going, well, this is what it says in the dictionary, and other people are going, well, this is how we use it in society. The word strike last week was how it was being used in society, maybe not the dictionary definition. And I believe, my opinion is, the way we're talking about rights in this instance, it's more like how we're using it colloquially in society as opposed to the dictionary definition of it. It's the conditions under that contract that they have the rights to that no one else do. Chewy, you come along to my place, you don't have the rights to get the same interest rate with my bank that I've negotiated. I've got that right, but it doesn't mean you don't have rights. But I've negotiated a special rate because the girl had a crush on me. But doesn't mean you get to have it, and you get to push it onto my mortgage or my contract with the bank and saying, I want that too. No, I've negotiated that right, that condition. And I'm the only one that's allowed that. Māori have negotiated these conditions, and they are entitled, to use Mr. Luxon's favorite word, to those conditions. Fair?
I think a perfect example of that change in language is something, I know it's been bubbling away, but I really saw it come to the fore with the recent hikoi. The term tangata tiriti. Tangata whenua, tangata tiriti. I really like that. Like, it's not like, because Pākehā is a different thing. But tangata tiriti brings so many people under that umbrella and just makes it really clear what the two parties are. I do not have a problem with the special relationship that Māori have with this country being the first people here. That needs to be recognized. I love saying this in comment section. There's someone in the chat that's going to love this as well. Second place does not generally mean you get naming rights. It's silly. If you want to call it Mount Egmont, all that signals to me is that you are some dusty old boomer-minded dinosaur that can't adapt to change and thinks that just from such a white supremacist point of view that you can't even get out of your own way to realize what decade you're in and look at a map and see where in the world you live. If you want to Mount Egmont, you can get in a boat and you can go to a different country, point at a mountain, you can call it Mount Egmont. You see how that flies.
The conversation that you've just kind of said there about, the original conversation and what was happening back in the day and who was here first kind of flows quite well into the next part of this conversation, which we're not quite to yet, but about the co-governance. So let's get to the end of this clip where they're still talking about the treaty principles referendum, then we'll go on to the co-governance bit.
He challenges that, doesn't he? Because he under his rewrite, the government would have the right to govern all New Zealanders, probably not controversial, but he goes on to say that the government would honour all New Zealanders in chieftainship of land and property. New Zealanders would all be equal under the law and have the same rights and duties.
But that's there anyway. That's that's there in the current statute as here and now. What he's trying to do is to manipulate a historic agreement so that actually it's shared on the same basis as that which was promised to Māori.
So what would be the impact if he was successful? He probably won't be, because National said he's not going to support it.
Yeah.
But what would the impact be, do you think, if this did go to a referendum?
Yeah, I think that you will see action in this country, protest in this country, opposition in this country, never seen in the history of this country before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are those of us who will not be, that we will not sit still and remain idle. That when you got this sort of nonsense.
So are you promising / warning of this regardless, or when this bill comes up for discussion?
If this bill is passed and it goes beyond the first reading, they'll be held to play. Simple as that. They'll be held to play. It's an attack on an agreement that was enshrined in a trusting way by those rangatira in 1840. And yet you got a political idiot here who is trying to modernize a document that actually will make 1840 a nullity.
So there you go, Chewy. There's part one. I know we talked quite a lot through it. Is there anything else you want to add to it, or should we go to the co-governance?
No, look, I think he's just echoing what we and others have said, is that I think Seymour is really underestimating how much feeling there is out there. And I think the two protests that we have had this year are warning shots.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that the government, especially after this cancer, payment thing, will be very, is gun shy the right term? Gun shy? Of getting into another battle that will be, I think, very, very poorly. Let me put it this way. If it goes beyond the first reading, I think you might start to think about a one-term government. Like that might be the straw. If you want to activate Māori and I guess people supporting Māori, people who are buffers, then that's the way to do it. You want to kind of guarantee yourself to be, well, I can't say guarantee, but to be a one-term government, my friends, that might be it. So I don't think it'll go past it, because as stupid as National seems to be, not even understanding the flack they were going to get for the cancer treatments fiasco, I don't think they'll be stupid enough to put our founding document and the way we read it to a referendum. I mean, yeah. So, the what is it? The document of independence. What's it called in America? The amendment number, the second amendment, the whatever that's called. Let's put it to a vote to see if we still want to have it to be relevant. What? It's just ridiculous. Hey,
I honestly, I think the only way that they would be able to realistically move the treaty from the position that it is at the moment is go, well, we're going to become a republic. And then that's something that a lot on the right won't want to touch either. But it's just, if you go for a republic and go, well, the treaty was an agreement between the crown and now we're not having the crown as the head of state, and you could do some fucking legal flimflammery around that. But that's a whole different fucking thing.
Yeah, there is an unfortunate reality if that was to happen. So when you go into business, you know what a royalty is? It's where you get like a little, like if I invent something and and a company buys it off me and they're going to give me $1 for every unit they sell, that's a royalty. If that company then gets bought out by a bigger company, the bigger company has to come in and negotiate with me to get rid of my royalty because that's a part of the original agreement. So if that happened, if we went to a referendum, what would have to happen is Māori would have to basically be consulted and come to an agreement as to why they were going to give up their side of the original contractual agreement. You couldn't just say the government's deciding that's what we're going to be at, because there's a founding document that's an agreement between two parties. One party can't just decide to go, what, we're a Republican from now, a Republic from now. So therefore, if that did happen, Māori would have to be on board. And why would they be on board? Who knows the conditions that would bring on board. That's one of the reasons I don't think, certainly in my lifetime, I don't think we'll be a Republic, because what are Māori going to have to negotiate out of or get from that agreement to kind of make that agreement null and void and move on to the new one, into the new land. Anyway, look, speaking of, let's do this now, because this is a really, really, I know it's only 2.5 minutes. I don't think I'll interrupt it. I'll try not to. So it's very, 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 very good look at what co-governance is, as is seen by Tuku Morgan. Let's have a look.
A lot of the controversy about this subject comes from this idea of co-governance, and Labor got very tied up in that. What does co-governance mean to you?
Partnership. We've had partnership
Here's the thing,
on the Waikato River
sure.
Since 2010. 2010 has been in existence under what we call the Waikato River Authority, where there are equal number of iwi and equal number of Crown representatives, and it's worked well.
How far should that go? Because some people look at this as a maths equation and go, well, 17% of the population Māori roughly, yet should there be?
Yeah, but half the original contract, 50-50 in the contract, half the original agreement. In fact, when the agreement was signed, we're the majority.
50-50 representation on some issues.
Here's the problem.
How far does that go for you?
Yeah, well, here's the problem that we have in terms of history. In our iwi, 1.3 million acres were taken, rendering our iwi landless. Is there any is there any justice to that? Built on the back of that disposition of the theft of our lands, is that in our region here and now, nearly 30% of this country's GDP comes out of Mairohe. 75% of the water that comes into Auckland comes out of the Waikato and its associated the water bodies. And yet Waikato Tānu has been a mere spectator as successive councils and government have degraded the river to the extent that the river itself is a degraded body of water where we can't even take food or swim in it, safe from Raruwai all the way down to the port. Now you talk about justice. You talk about this 15% of the total population is absolute nonsense. I'm talking about justice here, and the injustice, the jagged edge of injustice has treated my people badly, and we've been on the wrong side of history. And so when we cut deals and we are smart enough to get these negotiations around co-governance and partnership, we should actually be applauded for taking a much more innovative approach, because in the last 100 years, we've watched councils degrade our water.
All right. You've called this our rangiriri moment, a time...
That's the last conversation we'll leave out. So, I remember, I think it was Moana Tūwhare when she came on one day talking to us about co-governance and said that we've got it upside down at the moment, because we think about co-governance as non-Māori in positions of power inviting Māori to the table, whereas co-governance based on the treaty was actually Māori saying to non-Māori, you can come to our table. So actually the document was signed and the agreement of this land was Māori offering co-governance to non-Māori. And just because, again, back to the contractual agreement, just because now non-Māori are the majority, you don't get to flip. You don't get to flip the script all of a sudden and say, oh, that contract we signed? We're just going to do it the other way now. And another one, just hearing Tuku talk about what they've given up and what they've had taken and what still no shared ownership of these things. I just think it's a really interesting perspective. Chewy.
Yeah, look, we've mentioned this before, and I think it was a clip that we played. What's good for Māori is good for all of us, and I think there is nothing more clear than that, than the state of our rivers, the state of our natural environment. The European-centric way of doing things that we have had in this country for over 100 years has got us to this point where we have artificially fertilized the land, we have grazed it, we have burned our forests down, we have ruined our water table with nitrates, we have ruined our water quality to the point where it becomes an election issue that you can't swim in a river like we used to be able to when I was a kid.
Mm.
Those systems that we have built and a version of capitalism that we have has cost us all of those things. And I think that is the big driver behind my support for a lot of what Māori are asking for here, is that Europeans had their shot. This is what it's got us here. Where is the harm in trying a different way? When we talk about European supremacy or white supremacy or that sort of thing, it is the assumption that the way that we have done things and the way that we have structured this country is the best way to do it. And I think there is so much evidence out there that it's not. And if you know that it's not, and you know that it's not working, but you keep doing it, then that's on you.
Mm.
My whole thing is the people that were here, the people that signed that document and said, hey, look, king, queen, whatever, fucking pull your people into line. Here's the agreement. Then they get a say. And people talk about it's not democratic. It's still democratic. People still vote. The people don't change. People will make their feelings heard. But at the moment, what we have is we have too many voices shouting down Māori, saying that there's not enough of you, that your opinions don't matter, that you're not European, you just wouldn't understand how superior we are and how superior the way that we do things is. It's just beyond you. Like, every time you hear that, you see it in the news all the time, Māori asking for something. No, but it's so different from the way that we do it. See it for what it is. It's laziness, it's lack of forethought, and it's just people being stuck in a rut of thinking and are too fearful that the needle will move too far one way and suddenly we'll be deprived. If deprived means that we get our natural environment back and we get clean rivers back and we have a society that's not at each other's necks, that we don't have 2/3 of the people in this country shitting on the other third and going, there is a problem. You're right. There's problems for Māori. Lots of you are in prison. Lots of you die early. Lots of you aren't hitting educational markers that we have set. You're not interacting well with the society that we have imported, and that is your fault.
Mm.
Fucked.
Yeah, something that just occurred to me as well while you were talking about swimming in streams when you were a kid, that you can't be swung them anymore. There's not really an absolute answer as to how long Māori have been here, but people seem to say kind of between 800 and 1200 years. So let's call it 1,000 years. So that means 30 years ago, all the way back 1,000 years before that, the rivers were fine. You could swim in them. You could eat out of them. And the last 30 years has been what's happened to them to make them degraded, as Tuku was saying, or poisonous would be another word. So there's like 1,000 years
poisonous
of being able to do it. And in the last 30 to 50 years, screwed from here on in. So
nitrate levels in Canterbury rivers, that's a ticking time bomb for our public health system.
Yeah.
We're going to have people that have bore water supplies getting cancers. Oh, we're talking about cancer again. Funny. You know, my family's batch, where I used to be able to swim in the river, and my grandfather would fish from the river. We have to take bottled water out now.
Mm.
It used to be surrounded by sheep farming. Now it's surrounded by dairy farming. And nobody's really connecting those two dots, that the alluvial plains of Canterbury and the really shallow water table, and suddenly we're over irrigating the land so cows can live there.